Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Luivette Resto, and I get the honor this afternoon to be in conversation with Los Angeles Poet Laureate Lynne Thompson. Lynne Thompson, as many of you know, she's the Poet Laureate of LA and the Poet Laureate Fellow of the Academy of American Poets. She's the author of 3 collections of poetry, Beg No Pardon, Start with a Small Guitar, and Fretwork. And recent work can be found or is forthcoming in Ploughshares, Massachusetts Review, Best American Poetry, and Copper Canyon. Thompson recently completed her term as chair of the Board of Trustees of Scripps College and also sits on the boards of Cave Canem and the Los Angeles Review of Books. So yes, it is my honor to be in conversation with her for the next hour or so and get an opportunity to chat with Lynne about what it's been like to be Poet Laureate for almost 2 years now, and her new work. So welcome, Lynne.
Thank you so much, Luivette. It's a delight to be here with you especially.
Yeah, I'm excited. So yes, this is going to be just a really chill conversation. This is kind of the way I'm approaching it.
Good.
I didn't want to stress out about it because I was like, well, this is 2 Caribbean poets. Like I messaged the other day, because I was reading Beg No Pardon and at a wine bar, and
place to read it.
and as I was reading it, I was like, oh, she's a Caribeña. This is Caribeña poetry. Like, I get this. And I did want to touch upon the work in a few, but I did want to surprise you a little bit.
Okay.
I know you were like, I don't want surprises. But so I reached out to a couple of your contemporaries and other LA poets, and I asked them the question, what did it mean for them to have you specifically as their Poet Laureate?
Oh, okay.
And so I'm not going to mention names. I can give you names offline because I have those receipts, but I wanted you to hear what some people just literally had to say about you. She's an absolute master of language. She has that impact through storytelling. Another person wrote, when I found out she was our Poet Laureate, I felt so seen. She really represents all of us. Lynn, Luis, Robin, they really are the people's Poet Laureates. So accessible. They didn't feel like poets on high. They feel like one of us. Another person responded saying, she's a powerful writer, a no-nonsense kind of person who takes her role seriously. She's gracious, dedicated, and kind to boot. Another person responded, and I want to hear your responses to this. I really want you to take this in. It meant we had an ambassador for the fullness of the art form. The big reading at the LA Library demonstrated her respect for poets who write from a voracious and eclectic and wide-ranging set of stylistic, cultural, and political imperatives. I think such generosity is how we grow in our voices. It's how we learn to expand our own voices, and it's how we generate ethical community. Having Lynne as my Poet Laureate made me wish she would have gotten more non-pandemic constricted time during her tenure. She is so sweet, thoughtful, and inclusive. She doesn't just write poetry, she crafts lyrical monuments designed to stand the test of time. Lynne's work was the first time I had ever heard a poem and immediately knew it deserved to be preserved at the Smithsonian Institute.
Oh my God. Wow.
Right. And hold on, I'm not done. Hold on. This is what I got. Hold on. Lynne is who you want your celebrities and culture shapers to be. Kind, generous, thoughtful, cognizant of the fact that there's no room for everybody because there's no limit to the table we can build together. Lynne is a class, act, and an icon. I also love that Lynne paid her dues. I recall nights at the world stage in the 90s. I know she attended workshops in Idlewild and many other settings while she was working full-time, studying, soaking up the national poetry conversation, and being dedicated to her vision of her own place in those conversations.
Well, I'm overwhelmed. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, that's what you have meant to a wide range and a wide variety of poets, because I did poll different people in the spectrum of emerging poets, just starting out and as well as established poets. And this is what they had to say about you. How does it all feel?
Well, it feels like I did what I hoped I would do in this position, that I would reach out to a large number of poets. And even doing that, I met some poets the other night and realized, there's so many of us. And Los Angeles is just a difficult city to get your arms around in terms of trying to get to every venue.
Mm-hmm.
But I tried my best, and I'm very proud of the event that Grant Heyer, who was the inaugural poet of Anaheim, and I co-hosted at the library. It was exactly what I wanted. Different ages, different races, different points of view, different types stylistically of poetry. It really was what we both envisioned. So I'm gratified that people saw the effort, appreciated the effort, and now I'm energized to continue, even though my term will be ending, to really support the community in any way that I can.
Oh, that's amazing. One of the responses actually got me thinking. I already had this question in mind, but they responded and had it already in there. What was it like for you to come into this position while we were still in a pandemic? Like, I mean, we're still in a pandemic, granted, but what was it like coming in when things were really still shut down and readings and venues were still not as in person as they are now? What was that like coming in for you?
Yeah, it was really something to adjust to. I have to admit, I thought to myself, of course I would get selected in the middle of a pandemic. I can't do anything, right? but working with the library and other venues, Zoom has been a lifesaver. We'd much rather be together physically, but in the absence of that, I was able to reach out in that way, and that was helpful. First of all, I was shocked because I didn't think that they would necessarily appoint any poet laureate during the pandemic. It took me a minute to get over the shock that it was even happening. But I think the efforts of the library in particular to help programming in any way that was reasonable under the circumstances. And then it would look like things were opening up and they closed back down. So that's been a challenge. And that's why the event at the library was so meaningful, because I could overhear bits of conversation of poets who had only seen each other on Zoom. They had never actually met. So this was an opportunity for them to meet face to face. So, it's been a challenge, but poetry is always a challenge to bring it to the community. So we just had to find other ways to do it. I tried to do it through my podcast, which is a weekly podcast, so people can get that little taste of poetry every week. So it's been a challenge, but so many people have helped that I think it sets a roadmap. If you got a problem, you're just going to have to figure your way around the problem.
Right. No, that's true. I was thinking about that too. I was like, she came in right when things were still closed off, and we were also trying to figure out how to teach, how to live in this space, and then how do you then take on this amazing position? And I mean, it's just I was wondering about that myself. It's like, and then things started to open up, and you get to then, excuse me, but you get to really be able to be with folks and in person, But yeah, I was wondering how you felt about taking on that position in 2021 as things were still like closed off.
It just reminded me we don't get the things we want necessarily when we want them.
Right.
But, and if that happens, we just have to figure out a way to make it work.
And you definitely did. And I definitely agree with the person who commented the organized reading in the summer at the library. That was monumental. It was epic. I mean, you're absolutely right. I agree. I bumped into poets I hadn't seen in a decade because of just life. Yeah. And to hear them read, or to see some people. It's funny. One person was in the room when I read, and then I had to leave. And then I got an email saying, I finally got to see you read in person, because I facilitated something through Beyond Baroque. So we only knew each other for 3 or 4 months over Zoom, but they apparently were in the space, and I couldn't see them very well. We were all masked up as we should be, but it was just fascinating to be in the community again and to see people face to face. It's weird when you get out of the little box, right?
Absolutely, it's a whole different dynamic, and I'm just again so grateful that the library didn't hesitate absolutely, Lynn, when can we do it? And I knew that we would never get everyone because it was summer. And it was hard to come up with a date that worked for the library and for myself and for Grant and for the people I wanted to attend. But I think we still had about 125 poets and their guests, which is pretty amazing. And I felt very representative of the city.
Absolutely, yes. And everyone was what I appreciated too, everybody was very respectful of each other's space and health, and that was still there. And you could say, and I thought that was really moving. It's like, okay, everybody's still respecting each other's space and wearing masks, and again, not encroaching on anyone's personal space if they didn't ask for it, or people were asking, can I give you a hug? And because it's been so long, but also just to remind you of our community. It was so warm. I was like, yeah. Everybody's still looking out for each other. And
absolutely.
And that was really cool. So would you say that was probably, because I had a question, it's like, what would you say was the most gratifying program for you over the past 2 years? Would you say that's number one for you?
I think so. I think so, because I've done a lot of things in other spaces outside of Los Angeles as well, either via Zoom or occasionally in person. And a lot of those were focused on me reading my work or talking about being the poet laureate. And what I liked personally about this day was it wasn't about me. It was about all of you, all of the poets in the city. And so for me, that's really got to be the highlight of my 2 years as poet laureate.
Was there something that you didn't get a chance to do that you were like, ooh, if I had a couple more months or another term?
I think that it was hard both for schools and for libraries to get as much programming as they might have gotten if we hadn't had the pandemic, because they had to think, the libraries, for example, were shut down for a long time before they started opening up to any kind of programming, not just poetry. And so I think that made it a little bit more difficult. I mean, I did get to do some workshops in libraries and readings as well as at some schools, but I just think so much was going on that the teachers, for example, were trying to get a handle on their classrooms. And, the idea of having a visitor is, okay, now I'm adding this on top of trying to figure out how is this going to work. So if it had been any other time, I think I would have done more workshops and visited more libraries. But even with that, people were very generous and worked on ways to make it work. Another highlight was doing a workshop at the Will and Ariel Durant Library on Sunset, which caters to a large homeless population. And I think the majority of people that attended, and this was in person, fully masked, were part of the homeless community. So it felt very gratifying to be able to say to them, I hear you. I want to hear what you're working on. I want to be available to you. So that was very gratifying, but I wish I could just have done a little bit more.
Well, you did. I felt that you were everywhere, though. I kind of felt that even with the pandemic, you were definitely touring away. You were doing and I was really happy to see that. And I mean, like, it's not easy during this time. And I thought that you were very accessible and always kind of moving, and I never thought you were invisible throughout any of this for the past 2 years. And I can't believe 2 years went by so fast.
It did go by very, very quickly. And I decided if I'm going to do it, I'm going to be available and accessible. I think I told some folks after the reading at the library in August, I said, okay, I'm taking the rest of August off because I'd been pretty much nonstop and it was starting to catch up with me a little bit. No. But, September came and I was right back in it. So I'm glad that it does feel like I was accessible, because that was definitely a goal.
Absolutely. And I was thinking about this too the last couple of days, getting ready for the conversation, and noticing the commonalities between your term, Luis's term, and Robin's term, and to see the common theme is community.
Yes.
It seemed like, in my mind, I'm envisioning almost like a race, and someone just passed the baton to the next poet laureate. I said, okay, here you go, it's your turn.
Exactly.
And that seemed to be the common theme throughout these past 6 years. Do you feel that? Do you feel that that's what it was for you when you took this on, or?
Yeah, I think everybody, and I want to include Eloise as
Yes.
well, was our first poet laureate and unfortunately became ill just as she was beginning to serve. But I think we all had a view, even if it was from a different perspective, on how do we best serve the community. And so that was very instructive for me to be able to say, okay, there are many, many ways to do this. There's not any one right way.
Mhm.
And just was really instructed by those who came before me.
So in that vein, what instructions or what advice would you give to the next person, whoever they may be? What advice would you give them going out?
Get lots of rest, because if we have a poet laureate, the poets, as well as people who love poetry, like librarians, like teachers, like community centers, will be reaching out and asking you, questions about it, asking you to engage with their various communities. And you have to me, as much as you can say yes, as much as your own schedule and health and um, family allows, you should do as much as you're capable of doing, because that's the role, is to
Mm.
represent, be the face of poetry for your community and beyond. I mean, the good thing about Zoom is some of the readings and workshops I did had people from overseas. Obviously, that wouldn't happen if I was teaching at the World Stage or Beyond Baroque or Avenue 50 or at one of the libraries. So in some ways, Zoom was very helpful because it opened our community in a way that you can't do if you're only doing something in your particular town. But I would say to the next poet laureate, embrace it, love it. It will pay you as much as you are giving to the community. You will receive that back. And that's what I feel like I'm getting today. So I'm
Yeah.
very excited that you asked people how they felt I did.
Yes, I needed you to know, as you know, as you're closing out, how much how much you are loved and appreciated. And I agreed with everything, that all the responses I was getting from all these poets, because that's how I personally have felt. I definitely agreed with the person who said they felt seen. Definitely, you're a master of language, which definitely we'll get into. But also how kind you are and how generous you are. And that's not something you find in anyone and many people, unfortunately, in this world. And it's not just exclusive to poet laureates. But I mean, that generosity too is poet. One of the things I did say when we did the reading in July, and this was, I forgot, I think I know who I was sitting next to. I'm not going to shout them out because whatever. But as I was sitting there, I looked around the room, and like you said, it was over 100 of us or something. And I said, yeah, there's a lot of talent, there's a lot of poetry, but there's a lot of egos in this room too. And and it's true. We laughed at it because poets definitely have egos. But I think about you. You don't have an ego. You don't have an ego, Lynne. Not like, and your generosity to help others is palpable, and you carry it right on your sleeve. So I definitely agree with that person who said how generous you are, because you don't have an ego about you. You could easily have an ego, but you don't. And that's
well, I think to some degree poets have to have an ego, because we have to kind of force our way into the conversation, because so often poetry is an afterthought. But if I don't appear to have an ego, I'm sure that I do, but if I don't appear to have one, it's because so many people in this town in particular and beyond were always so kind to me when they had no reason to be. I'm a lawyer by training. I think a lot of people have heard me talk about this. And I just woke up one day and said, I really think I want to pursue poetry, much to my mother's horror. Like, seriously, what is wrong with you? But everybody I met was like, oh, Lynne, you should come to this reading, or oh, Lynne, come to this workshop, or go to AWP, or send me a poem to publish. And I mean, I knew nothing. I don't have an MFA. I don't have some of the accoutrement of poets that I thought were critical, and they are critical. But one of the things I wanted to convey during my term was there's more than one way to skin a cat. Meet people, talk to people. not all of them, but the majority of them will be kind and will be helpful. And so that always is ringing in the back of my head. And that's why I think I have tried so hard to elevate other poets, because other poets did that for me. Literally just saying, oh, Lynn, I remember going to the Dodge Festival years and years ago and meeting Robert Pinsky. And I mean, I'm just a little attendee. I don't know anything. And he said, oh, come in the tent and eat with the poets. I said, I don't think I'm supposed to be in there. He said, what are they going to do? They're not going to kick you out. And literally brought me in and sat me at a table with like all the people that I was admiring. And I'm thinking, God, you know, what is going on? So to me, it's important that I pay that back because of the generosity of so many people I can't even name.
Well, you definitely have, and you continue to do so. It's not like just because your term is over, who you are, it obviously is not done. So I think that is definitely going to, you know, continue. And all of us feel it. All of us have felt it. And that's why you got the accolades and you know, all the mushy gushy comments this morning. I had another question. So as you were, you know, doing all these programs and either Zoom or in person, were you able, I mean, you were able to, but how were you able to then balance it out with, you know, still being a poet and creating new poetry for yourself and for future projects? How were you able to balance that out?
I don't think I really balanced it out, is part of the answer. I continued working with a workshop, a group of women I've been working with. We've all been working with one another for probably more than 15 years. That's led by Dorothy Barisi, who has taught for years at Cal State Northridge. And so I kept that going because these were kind of my group and we know each other's voices and critique each other's poems. So that was important, but I wasn't always writing as much as I wanted to, but I was lucky because I was starting to think about a new book. So I was really spending a lot of the time trying to figure out how to compile it and what should be in and what should be out. But with the term ending, maybe I'll get back to writing a little bit more poetry.
Do you mind sharing anything that you might be? Do you have anything on deck by any chance?
Well, I can read something from the new manuscript. I was trying to decide what I might, maybe this is appropriate. This one will be in the new manuscript.
Does the new manuscript have a title at the moment or not yet?
It's got a working title that I'm not going to share because I'm very insecure about the titles because I'm very title challenged. And my book, which is Beg No Pardon, originally had a title, The Open Hydrangea Box. It was published by Perusia Press, which shout out to Perusia, one of the best small presses around. And Susan Can at the time was the editor and publisher. And she said, what does that mean? And I said, well, I couldn't really explain it. She said, we're not using that title. It's lovely, but no. And she was the one that helped me come up with Beg No Pardon. So I'm very insecure. So let's leave the title alone for the moment.
No worries. I totally get that. I think the best advice I got from Martina Espada was keep the titles one or two words. And
well, I've done that in the main. My second book's a little longer, but Fretwork and Beg No Pardon, short to the point. And the new one's like that too.
Yeah. He learned that the hard way because the book of poetry that I fell in love with, what was my introduction for his, is a really long title. And even when I first met him, he was like, "Oh, what poem, what book, what collection was it?" I kept messing up the title, and later on when we were just having plain conversation, he said, "And that's why I started changing my titles because you're not the first person to kind of jumble it up, and I just got tired of it, and so noticed that my titles kept getting shorter and shorter, and it didn't dawn on me, right? And then when I laid everything out, I saw all his collections, like, oh my gosh, you're right, they just kept getting shorter and shorter, and now they're just like one word." So yes, I understand that very well.
All right, so this is one of the poems from that new collection. Even before the pandemic, we were the earthquakes we fell into. We were weather born of fire and feathers left on the Rotalbo at San Juan Capistrano. Look at our seas, sad kelp and plastics and eels. Look at all the alleys adorned with abandoned syringes, festooned with stale bread. Where we lived, our children were contagious. Their teachers were contagious. Their playdates were full of contagion, and none of them recall when they last saw a flight of violet-crowned hummingbirds. Where we lived, brown was and remains the color of our true love's skies. Where we lived, we laid in our thistle beds over Chumash bones, laughing our hyena-like laughter. And look at our miseries singing. There is a fountain filled with blood.
That's amazing. Thank you. And that's in the new collection.
That's in the new collection, yeah.
When you're writing a poem, and you may have answered this question in other spaces, but I'm really curious. I'm going to be selfish. I want to know how many.
Go for it.
I'm curious because I think this is obviously it differs for everybody, but how grueling or not grueling the revision process is for you. I'm curious.
You know, when I started writing seriously, it was grueling. And I forget who of the many wonderful people I've studied with said, you should embrace it. That's when the fun starts. And I'm a puzzle person. I like crosswords and Sudoku and all those kind of puzzles. And for me, putting together a puzzle is almost an act of sculpture. And others have heard me say, you know, it's the Oscar Wilde, attributed to Oscar Wilde saying, oh my God, I worked so hard this morning. I put a comma in and this afternoon I took it out. So, you know, that's kind of how I approach it. Should this be here? Do I even need this stanza? And, you know, I find having others to work with is helpful because you can look at it 500 times and someone looks at it once and said, but Lynn, I don't think you need that line. You've already said that, or it doesn't say it as well as, you know, whatever. So it's the revision that can go on forever that is really, I think, where the poem gets its juice. Although I'm also fond of saying you don't want to revise the juice out of it, right? You don't want to work on it so much that it's kind of lost that original energy and impetus. So it's a fine line, but I find a lot of joy in it, actually.
And when do you let it go?
Well, I guess I have a couple of answers to that, things that stay in the back of my mind. So there's a poem in the first book that I had, I won't say an argument, but a discussion with the editor about how that poem should look. And we put it in the way that she proposed, in large measure because I was insecure and I said, she knows what she's doing. I have no idea what I'm doing. But I would go and I would read that poem at readings in the original version and in the version in the book. And I wouldn't tell the audience who didn't have the book which was which. And invariably, people liked the original version. So I put that version in the second book and just gave it a different name.
Oh.
So I say that, I tell students that because the poem belongs to you. And if you want to do something else with it, it's your poem, do that. The other thing that I've told students that always sticks in my mind, I remember David St. John telling a group of us in a workshop that he was introducing Galway Cornell at a reading here in Los Angeles. And when he went backstage, Galway was writing something in the book that had won the Pulitzer Prize. And David asked him, what are you doing? And he said, this damn poem never worked. Well, I love that story because it shows that even the biggest prizes in the world you might win, you may still not feel satisfied with the poem. So maybe it's never really done. Maybe you've moved on to something else and don't want to take the time to go back. But it's your poem and you might revise it with your last breath. So those two things always kind of stick in my mind when I think about revision.
That's a great story. He was, writing right there in the moment, and like,
In the moment, you know, and he's won the Pulitzer Prize. It's not like, oh, it's some poem, I never got it published or whatever. No, this is in the, and I don't know what poem it was, but this is in the book that wins the Pulitzer Prize. Really? Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's interesting to see the relationship that we develop with poems. We get really, I feel like we get attached. Like there's certain poems that I'm very attached to.
Right.
And they're the poems that and I don't know if this is everybody, for me, when I'm in a slump, there's certain poems that I revisit and I'll reread almost in loop. And I'm very much attached to what's being said in this poem, how I feel when I read it. Like I want to revisit those feelings and I want to feel those emotions again. I can't, and then you meet the poet if you're lucky and you find out that it's like not their favorite poem or something, or
Right.
they're like, oh yeah, that poem. Ugh. And I'm like, oh my God, like that's my favorite one. And so it's interesting to see the relationship we develop with specific poems, not necessarily collections, but really specific poems. We become so attached to them as they were living, breathing organisms, I feel. But to see that the actual creator of it doesn't always feel the same.
Correct.
Yeah, that's
because the whole process really is the writing and the reader or the listening audience, because they will bring, in many cases, not always, but in many cases, a completely different reaction than you might have had. It sounds like you may have had this experience. I have as well. So you send off your packet of poems and you hope they get published in, well, I won't name my favorite journal because all the other journals will be mad, but you want it to be published in Journal X. And the poem that you stuck in as a throwaway just to kind of round out the packet, that's the poem they want. And you're thinking, really? What am I missing?
right.
So you do get attached, but you have to also kind of not be so attached to allow the other poems to have their space as well.
We actually have Patricia Smith has a question.
Mm-hmm. She's been texting me behind the scenes. You better make this good, Patricia.
She has two questions, so you got to answer. You got to answer both of them. All right, and it's Patricia. So, how has your experience as poet laureate influenced your approach to your work?
I think I probably do think about the audience more than I did before. I think I was coming from a perspective of wanting to craft the best poem I was able to craft without thought to how it might be received. I think not only because of the poet laureate position, but just because of where we are in the world. I'm a little bit more conscious than I was early on as to how a poem may be taken in. So I would say that would be the biggest effect.
And that's I think that's valid. That's actually, I think many of us, I think as writers too, are potentially not rethinking, but reapproaching things the way, like some of us who've been writing for a longer period of time may not be writing in the same way as we were 10, 15 years ago.
Right.
As we're writing now, because the world is different. And so I definitely understand that. Patricia had another question. Of course she does. But these are all amazing questions. So thank you, Patricia. Was there anything unsettling about the intense and immediate spotlight turned upon you and your work once you were named Poet Laureate?
Yes. I really had to work hard to get over imposter syndrome. I kept saying, this is ridiculous. Why me? I mean, the city has hundreds of worthy poets. And I think I felt a little almost embarrassed that it was me. You know, I am not worthy, that kind of a thing. And many people, Patricia among them, but a lot of people locally too, said, Lynne, you're the poet laureate. You know, they didn't just dig you up from under a rock somewhere. So I think it took me longer than it should have, perhaps, to say, okay, you know, I am the right person for this job at this time. So that was a challenge, because, you know, you look at other poet laureates, or even not poet laureates, that you admire, and you think, I'm not one of them. And I think that, particularly because I don't have a PhD in literature, I don't have an MFA, I thought, well, those things will never happen for me, and that's fine, because I'm happy writing my poems. So when it did happen, I kind of felt like, yikes. And I also felt something that I heard from Bob Hass 100 years ago, the expectation of, well, if you're the poet laureate, you must be all that and a bag of chips, right? And I thought, yeah, but I'm not so much. But he did say something that has stayed with me forever, and that I share with students. We all sit down with a blank piece of paper. He said, I may have, and this was early on when I was just trying to figure out, you know, what a pencil was. I mean, I was green as a poet. And he said, I may have some tools that you haven't learned yet, but that's really the only difference between us, plus the expectation that since this title has been put on you, that you must be, especially non-poets, well, you probably can sit down and just whip out a poem, which is what I had said to him, like an idiot, right? And he said, no. He said, we all start with that blank piece of paper, trying to figure out how am I going to craft this piece? And that's always stayed with me. It was one of the best things anybody ever said to me, to make me realize, you know what? You may have a title. First of all, you're only going to have it for 5 minutes, so get over yourself. And what are you going to do with it? I mean, you know, it's doesn't mean that you're a better poet, or, you know, it may mean you get a little bit more exposure, but in terms of the work itself, you still need to produce. You still need to produce.
I'm so relieved and glad that you talked about imposter syndrome, because I think many of us, really, myself included, you know, live in that space quite a lot. I mean, I am always, my close friends, I've mentioned this analogy. I always feel that I am at the little kids' table at Thanksgiving.
Exactly.
And I'm watching the adults.
Right.
And I'm always going to be put in that little kids' table. And I'm reminded a lot, it's like, no, you're at the adults' table. But in my brain, I'm still that graduate student.
Exactly.
And, you know, first semester, first poetry workshop, feeling intimidated by all these other classmates who've read poetry that I've never read before. And I, you know, my own self of inadequacy, and also being the only person of color in a very white space.
Right.
So many things were, you know, running through my head at that time, and that still run through my brain. So, but now I'm older, and you're able to talk yourself down from that ledge way better now, I think, obviously. And then obviously we have friends in our community hold us and remind us, like, no, you deserve this.
Right.
And you've earned it. Like, that's another thing too. I always tell my students, I didn't give you this grade. You earned this grade.
Exactly.
Whether it's an A or a C or a D, like, this is yours. Right.
Right.
And so I do appreciate that you said that, because I think that many of us think that we hear the word poet laureate, whether it's the LA Poet Laureate, California Poet Laureate, the US Poet Laureate, that oh, you must know, you can write a poem in 5 minutes.
Right.
And you're like, I haven't read anything in 6 months.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So I really do appreciate that you shared that, because and I think that's what makes you who you are. And this is why you're loved, because you have added, you remind us of the humanity of all this, right? And how, yeah, I stare at I stared at a blank piece of paper just like everybody else. And yes, I may have this title, but I also like what you said. That's what you do with it, right? You have this platform for 2 years. Now what?
Yeah, exactly.
You've given this thing, now what? And you've done a lot with it. I definitely, like I said, we have tangible evidence of that. So, but I definitely love the fact that you said that. And Patricia says, "Thank you, my queen." So, I do, I did want to say something real quickly that there's a shout out that there's still Lynne Thompson socks available at the library store. I got to get my pair before they sell out. I mean, how is that, by the way? That was like another question that I had on the side. I don't think any other poet laureate had socks. So
I have a dear friend, Susan Terrace, who's a poet who lives in the Bay Area. Her daughter-in-law had made socks for Madeleine Albright. She made a pair for Aretha Franklin, and she made a pair for me, which was a total shock. I had no idea, but Susan, who is very generous in her own right, talked to the daughter-in-law and said, "My friend is a poet laureate of LA and she needs socks." And she had a photograph of me. And those of you who've seen the socks, I don't have a pair here to hold up, but she just grafted that onto really well-made socks. Some socks are thin. These are thick, really warm, cozy socks. And so someone was asking me, well, is there any particular platform that you want? And I was talking about Amanda Gorman and saying, well, she was on the cover of, it was either Vogue or Bazaar, I forget which magazine. And this friend said to me, "But Lynn, she's only on the cover for a month. You have socks forever." So I said, well, that's true. That is true. I do have socks forever. So yeah, that was pretty amazing. And the library is so sweet. I said, well, I have some socks here, and why don't I bring you down 10 pairs? And they said, "Is that the best you can do?" I said, "Nobody's gonna buy the socks." So we advertised on the library's platform, and I remember it was like a Thursday night, and they called me and they said, "The socks are sold out. Where can we get more of the socks?" So I said, "Here is who you need to contact. You guys talk among yourselves, figure it out." And so as far as I know, they've kept them in stock for my entire term. So that's really very special. Very, very special.
And you got to get your socks.
You got to get your socks. The library has them.
You got to get your socks. I got to get my socks too. That's a great stocking stuffer. Like literally, it's a stocking stuffer.
It's a stocking stuffer. That is correct.
I want to really, before we run out of time here, I want to go back to your work and looking at Beg No Pardon and Fretwork. And then now you're working on the on this next manuscript. And again, we're not, no title yet, released, but in your perspective, how are all these manuscripts in conversation with each other? What do you notice about your work and how's it building?
So I am fundamentally a storyteller who has chosen the genre of poetry to tell the stories that I want to tell. And they are very influenced, as you started off by saying, by my Caribbean heritage, as well as the fact that I'm an adoptee and met my birth mother. And many of the poems come from that circumstance as well. So a lot of the poems really have a lot to do with family, problems with family, happiness with family, et cetera, et cetera. With this new manuscript, I really feel like, okay, I'm sick of hearing it, and I'm sure others are sick of hearing it. And so it's a little bit more, it's very woman-centric in terms of the experiences, the joys, the miseries of being a woman, and more concerned with the environment, a little bit more political than those books have been. But there's still poems in there that reflect on where I come from. The first poem I ever wrote that made me think, okay, this is where you need to go, was a poem in my first book called How I Learned Where We Come From. And I realized that that is the fundamental question that obsesses me on a mini scale and on a macro scale. Where do we come from, both geographically, metaphysically, psychologically, because that informs who we are as human beings. And so I think for me, that's kind of an overriding question. I think I'm a different person being a Californian than I would be if I was a Texan or, you know, a New Yorker. So those questions of where do we come from and how does that inform who we are an obsession for me, and show up a lot in all of my poems, no matter what the subject matter is. And I'm also, I guess, increasingly interested in form. When I first started writing, I said, I don't want to write a sonnet. That's not very modern. That's not what I meant. I meant I was afraid to try to write a sonnet. And once I got my arms around the fact that, you know, if you're going to call yourself a poet, you should attempt these forms that have been around forever, the pantoum, the villanelle, the sonnet, etc. So that shows up a little bit more, my willingness to experiment with those in ways that I wasn't willing to early on.
And I had another question. You just sparked another question for me. What have your poems taught about, what have your poems taught you about you? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think they have laid bare that I wasn't always willing to take the extra step into the unknown. I didn't trust my ability to survive being in the unknown, that I really wanted to kind of control what I was doing. And the best poems don't do that. They end up somewhere that you didn't realize when you started writing them, that that's where you were going. So I think that's one of the lessons that I've learned from my poems is it's okay, Lynn, you're not going to fall off the edge of the planet. You know, you don't ever have to show this poem to anyone, but don't stop it prematurely because of, you know, whatever of the million voices that are going on in your head saying, don't do this, don't do that, whatever. Go for it. You know? So it's shown me how I was trying to kind of say, okay, the poem is going to be, you know, 30 lines. And no, I don't do that anymore.
Good. Yeah, I asked that question because I think I'm surprised by when you're, at least for me from personal experience and then just sharing with other folks, is that when they're writing, the poem becomes a mirror.
Yeah.
And some poems have that impact on you more than other poems. And like you just said, you can go in with a certain intention and then the poem takes a life of its own, which is, it sounds cliche, I get it, but that is true though. That does happen to many times where you go with like, this is going to be about this.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, you know, you end up writing or typing, you're like, whoa, I'm talking about my mom. Like, where did that come from?
Yeah, exactly.
And so, so I think in those moments, I feel that the creative process gets flipped, whether we're cognizant or not. And the poem now all of a sudden is taking control. And now, you know, they're trying to tell us something and they're showing us something. And so they're, you know, and that's why I asked the questions, like, do you think that your poems ever teach you anything? And I think they do. I think for myself, I think they've taught me several things that I was unwilling to look at,
right,
you know, on a conscious level. And then when you look back, like, oh man, I got some work to do.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
So
right.
yeah, that's why I asked. Yeah, that's why I asked the question. So yeah, I'm going to ask you, well, one thing I didn't realize that your mother had such a horrific response to you letting go of being a lawyer.
Yeah.
I was reading Beg No Pardon, like I said the other night, and I couldn't help but and I'm being selfish and weird, but I saw a lot of my own work in here, and I just was tripping out. I got to admit, I was like, oh my God, this reminds me of a poem that I wrote. I'm like, oh my God. And seeing these connections. And then the fact that you just admitted now what you said about your mom and being a lawyer, I got into law school.
Okay.
I kid you not, I got into law school. I took my LSATs, I got into law school, and that was the trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
And I told my family on graduation day that I was not going to go to law school and that I wanted to be a poet. And that did not go well.
I can imagine. Oh my God. And yet you followed your dream. It took me a while to have the courage to follow my dream. So I think that's fabulous that you said, you know, the passion is somewhere else. The passion is really somewhere else. I mean, I'm glad I'm an attorney, and people that know me really well, some who might be listening to this call, know Lynn's in lawyer mode, just like she's going to put you on the witness stand. So, you know, but it wasn't my passion. The poetry was the passion.
Right. Right. No, I get it. I get it. And the conversation did not go well with my Puerto Rican mother,
right,
who sacrificed so much for me to be there. And so that it was definitely a bumpy road.
Yeah.
And in all seriousness, for her and my whole family to kind of come around to like, oh, this is what she's going to do. And obviously the practical questions arise. Well, how are you going to make any money, and what's going to happen next?
Exactly. Is there any money in it? Because if not,
right.
You need.
How are you going to pay your rent? How are you going to pay your bills? Because
exactly.
I'm not paying your bills, but things like that, which I get. I totally, right. I get it now as a mom. Like I get that now perspective, but it's when you said that right now, I started laughing internally. Like, oh wow, there's another connection with her, because yeah, I remember telling my family, like, I'm not doing this. I'm going to go this other path. And so, and I also noticed reading your work, you're very good at closing your poems. You got killer lines.
Oh my God, that's so good. Because I always worry in my workshop, the group of us are always saying, now you don't want to have that skillet of meaning, right? Bang, bang, bang. Did you get it? Did you get it? Did you get it? Did you get it? So I'm glad to hear you say that.
No, as I was going through like, look, these are my tabs. Like, this is my nerdy, like I got nerdy tabs. Like you'll see, like I wrote like little things for myself. Like I went in. And what I was noticing for myself, it was like this rhythm. I was like, oh, she just got some killer lines. Like she's good at this. Like she's closing these poems out with a very nice, it's a punch to the gut, but not, not in a bad way, And so and that I'm wondering, that is not necessarily taught. I think you just got to know how to do that. Right. And so I'm going to ask you to read from this before we head out.
Sure.
This is, to me, maybe it's not like a poem that you read very often, but it's called Elegy for the Red Dress.
Ah, okay. Oh, yeah. And that's the poem that was in the second book, which is actually Start with a Small Guitar. It's the last elegy for the red dress in the second book, because that's the original version.
Oh, snap. Okay.
That this resonated with you, because that supports the editor's belief that this version said everything I needed to say.
No, that's not the reason why I chose it. I chose it because I don't think I've ever seen an elegy for anything other than a person. And
right.
Usually it's for a person. And I also love like I could hear your tone in this, and probably some of the newer work that's coming through that I've heard you read. And so I've heard you read from the new collection, I believe. And so I had those new poems in my brain when I read this to myself, and I could hear you in my head. And I just love, and I wrote to myself, where's that red dress now?
Like, yeah. Where is that red dress?
Where is that? And I just love I love the tone in this. I want you to read actually the version that you meant, please, if you don't mind.
The original version?
The one that you wrote, please. If you have it, that would be, I would love that.
It's in the second book. So what I did when I realized it's my poem, I can do whatever the heck I want with it. Absolutely. I wrote the elegy for the red dress.
Yeah.
So is the original version. So you can compare this with the one you're looking at in Beg No Pardon.
Yeah.
Last elegy for the red dress. Good morning, red dress. Heavy with the sweat of love wants to dance. Scented with the hopes of shy man, bold man, beg to take me home man. Still crinkly, crumply down the back from the hanker in their hands. Good morning, red dress. Morning, chase me, take me shoes. Look like you've been out on the town, like you've been dipped and twirled, dizzied and duped all night long, like you can't hang between sweatsuits and jeans, like you're another kind of gal. Hello and hey there, red dress, double strand of pearls, faded rose perfume still clinging to the bodice, the slip, the silk of the sleeve, still molten to my hips, my breasts, to the drum of my heart, hem softly pleated to a permanent party. Where have you been, red dress? And why have you moved on without me?
Yeah, you win. That's it. No, you win. You win. That is a much better version of this poem than this one. And the reason I say that is because the second you started reading it and I'm like looking at this, I was like, oh.
So she flipped the stanzas, took out a stanza, and took out the coda at the end. The question, where's the dress gone? Which is what the question was that you asked me. So I have a very dear poet friend here in LA, Candace. And Candace said the way she resolved it in her head was there are two very different poems. You know, that don't do really the same thing. But yeah, I think, and it's a lesson to all of us of trying to decide where you trust your own instincts, even though the famous poet or editor or whatever may make a suggestion, which poems do you really want to fight for? And I did not have that sense of security when this first book came out. I didn't expect to have a first book. David St. John said, it's time for you to have a book. I said, is that the way it works? Don't I have some epiphany? He said, nah, just look at the poems, put them together and have a book. I'm like, wow, you know, I thought something more magical had to happen. So, yeah, I it's hard to figure out that line between trusting yourself and trusting someone that you respect and admire and is more experienced saying, well, I think you should do it this way. You have to figure out where that line is.
No, that's great advice. I do like your version. I felt this, it's interesting to compare it really quickly. I felt that this version felt a bit more confined.
Yeah.
Like immediately that's what I thought about was you were reading. I was like, oh wait, this version that I'm reading or I read, it's confined.
Yeah.
What she's reading, this poem is breathing.
Yeah.
And so I like, and the fact that at least your poem tells me what happened to the red dress, because that was literally in my sticky note. Like, you know, it says, what happened to the red dress? Like, it literally says that. Okay.
The answer is the hips weren't having it.
Got it. Okay. Well, this is our time. We've reached our time. And I think that this is a great punctuation to our time together about giving advice to other poets. It doesn't matter where you're starting or you're in the middle of all this, but to trust yourself. And that's hands down the truth. You have to trust yourself, go with your gut, go with your instinct. And again, this has been the true giddy honor to just have this opportunity to talk with you so formally and to honor you once again. You deserve all your flowers to the bitter end of all this term. But thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this.
And thank you so much, Luivette. I can't think of anyone better to have interviewed me. I'm so grateful to you and to the library. It has been the joy of my life. I'm not going anywhere, but I kind of feel like, okay, I did my thing. So I'm just grateful to you and to the library and all of the poets and everyone who's indulged me, invited me, listened to me, both when I was happy and when I was crabby. It's been a great, great journey. So thank you for this. It's a great way to go out. And happy holidays to everyone.
Happy holidays, everyone. All right, folks. Bye.
Thank you. Give it up. Yeah.